I want to talk a little bit about, seeing Christ in the Old Testament because there are people out there that we love to talk about prophetic fulfillment of what Jesus has done. And there's just so much in the Old Testament and what Jesus fulfills, right? I mean, it's sometimes we kind of I know maybe just me, I say, okay, well, Jesus fulfills the Old Testament and kind of just leave it there. But, just for our listeners and just talk about where we see Jesus in the Old Testament fulfilling these scriptures, just some places.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing, like,
Right.
that's not I mean, what you said is true. He did fulfill it in just a million ways, and it's amazing. I mean, that's sort of the beauty of the scriptures, right? You could study it your whole life and
Mm.
still be learning new connections and new ways that these things are fulfilled. I mean, one that is really close to my heart because, I grew up celebrating Passover every year and just really love that holiday a lot is just when you look at the Passover, and you see how, God redeemed the people of Israel from
Mhm.
slavery and bondage to Pharaoh, and how much that narrative really is the human narrative, right? That's the gospel. Like each one of us have been slaves to sin, and we need the blood, the blood of the Lamb, the blood of our Redeemer, to to be spared from, the angel of death to step into freedom and life.
Yeah.
And especially, I think, for a lot of Christians when they know how some of the different things connect, like, especially, with the Last Supper being a Passover celebration. And, there's a lot of meaning connecting into the Passover story.
Yeah. Do you want to dive into that if you like? Kind of just dive because I know you've spent time talking about that. You want to dive into Last Supper specifically?
Sure. Yeah, I'll share a little bit more about that. When Jesus was at that Last Supper, which again was a Passover celebration,
Right.
probably like the most famous Passover celebration ever recorded
Right.
in history, right? And he took the bread and he said, "This is my body." What he was talking about was this unleavened bread, which in Jewish tradition, the unleavened bread is a picture of a sinless nature.
Hmm.
And the unleavened bread, when it's made, it's pierced and it's striped, which reminds us of so many passages about Jesus. By his stripes we are healed. They shall look upon me whom they have pierced. So you have kind of this picture of like a bread of life. It wasn't just any bread. Jesus was taking this very specific symbolic bread
Yeah.
in Judaism and saying, "This is my body." And then he was taking this very specific cup. In Jewish tradition, the cup taken on Passover after dinner is the cup of redemption, which is supposed to represent the blood of the lambs. And so he said about this very, very specific cup, with all of that meaning and all of that history, this cup is a new covenant in my blood. And so Jesus wasn't making up something new when he took these elements and said, "These are about me." He was actually connecting in with a narrative that was already thousands of years old about the sacrifice of the Passover lambs. And so he was fulfilling them, but also giving us something very tangible by which to remember him and understand his sacrifice on a deeper level. And so I think, I mean, there's so much more that could be said about that. It's very, very rich. And there's a lot of great materials out there. And if you just Google Christ in the Passover, we have a lot, Juice for Jesus, we have, videos and articles that dive a lot more into those teachings. But I think for all Christians, it's only going to make our faith and our customs richer when we understand all the Jewish historical context of what was happening in Jesus' day.
For sure. It definitely changes the way that you think about Passover and I guess what we call the Lord's Supper that we take. Definitely changes the way that you think about that,
Yeah.
for sure. And when you're sharing the gospel with Jews, do you kinda try to point out to them specific scriptures in the Old Testament that Jesus fulfills in the New Testament? I guess like Isaiah 53 or something like that. Do you kinda try to go through some of those?
Yeah, Isaiah 53 is one of the most common passages that we'll share with Jewish people. And I've seen this happen many times. Myself, I have, seen uh, where you're sitting with a Jewish person and you read to them from Isaiah 53 and they'll say, stop reading to me from the New Testament. And you'll say, "No, this is from the Hebrew scriptures." And it's like shocking to them. They've never seen anything like that before in Jewish tradition. And you know, we even in Israel sometimes, I know some of our missionaries there even will use like a copy of the Bible from the IDF, from the Israeli Defense Forces, to say, no, no, look, like this is the Jewish people's scriptures. It has not been changed. This is what it says. And it's so hard to deny that it sounds just like Jesus.
Yeah.
Even someone who knows very little about Jesus, which many people know extremely little about Jesus, but they still are often just really compelled by that passage. Um, yeah, I think, I mean, there's other passages that are used a lot, you know, in sharing the gospel. I think that, you know, Jewish people today are extremely diverse. So what you might share with someone who is, you know, maybe very secular could be very different than what you might share with someone who's very religious, who already is a bit more familiar with many of the scriptures and the passages. And, um, you know, some Jewish people today, you know, you have to start all the way at the beginning. Like,
Yeah.
does God exist? You know, because there's less and less just religious education that people are growing up with
Yeah.
today.